Shalom, and welcome to this special home edition of the Middle East Report. And I have a very special guest today. His name is Bill Koenig. He was a former White House correspondent, and he's also author of the must-read book called Eye to Eye. He joins us from Texas today. Bill, it's always great to see you, and it's always a pleasure to know what you have to say when we're discussing major events regarding Israel, the Middle East, the United States, geostrategic politics, but also Bible prophecy. So for our viewers, please give us an update on some of the activities and the work you've been involved in.
Well, Simon, it's like no other time in my 25 years of following world news, it's biblically relevant with so many things in play. And, 25 years ago, when I would speak at conferences in the US and around the world, we might have 3 or 4 events that are taking place at the same time that were biblically relevant. But today, 12 to 14 of the final day events that we're watching and told to watch through the scriptures are all in play. And each one is extremely complicated. Wars and rumors of war, the one world political order, one world religious order, the mark of the beast, the eventual electronic mark of the beast, nations against nations, tensions, alignments, inflation, on and on. So every issue by itself, including the coronavirus pandemic, is complicated. And it's so complicated that it affects these other areas that you and I as watchmen watch that make things just that much more complicated. But the good news is God gave us the details in his handbook, the Bible. 27% of the Bible is about Bible prophecy in the final days. We're blessed to be part of the church that fully understands from Genesis to Revelation that this is the word of God, and we know what to follow. And we know that Israel is God's time clock, and the city of Jerusalem will become a burdensome stone. So we're honored and privileged to be living at a time that's so significant biblically as we watch final day events falling in place.
I think that sums it up extremely well, Bill. But if we take, for example, the last 2 years, and what surprises me about the last 2 years, particularly with COVID-19 and the kind of global response to this pandemic that was manufactured in a lab in Wuhan, in China, is how much the world has changed. And it's almost as if within these 2 years that we've been living through, we've probably been living in what normally would take place maybe in 2 or 3 decades, take place in 2 years. The political changes, the economic changes, the social changes, the spiritual changes have been absolutely dramatic. And also sense of what you said earlier, that what we're seeing really is the speeding up of end time events, the acceleration of the birth pains that Jesus described in Matthew 24. Have you ever known a time like this?
No, not at all. And, over the last 2 years, we've had, like you said, 10 years worth of news in a week, a month, a couple months, numerous times. And the pandemic, the coronavirus, has done more to accelerate these final day events. And it's also given us a lot greater understanding of the people behind the scenes through the World Economic Forum, the Davos guys, the globalists, and their role in bringing things to completion, stripping us of a lot of our individual rights, where heads of states can tell you to get a vaccine or tell you that you need to wear a face mask, has led to this control apparatus, which the global warming climate control thing has been, is what is happening, is what we're seeing is an acceleration of control of every area of our life. And I know in the United States, we evangelical Christians are fighting this. Fortunately, we have free speech in the US. We have a lot of individual rights within our Constitution. It gives us a solid stability, but it is a fight. And I tell you, many of my friends like you, Simon, and others in Europe, we feel for you guys. We pray for you because you guys are in the front line. You're in countries where there's a very small evangelical base in countries throughout the Europe, and the globalists are able to implement and put things into place much quicker in your environment, as Australia and Canada as well, because you don't have that constitution. You don't have that basis, which we do, and also a pretty significant evangelical proactive base. So from what I'm hearing from you guys, the globalists, through the passports, through the digital IDs and things like that, are accelerating at a very rapid pace. And it's just final day all the way. And the catalyst, I always look at the potential catalyst. Sometimes we have one, sometimes we have multiple ones. But this pandemic, or plandemic as we call it here in the US, has definitely accelerated final day events.
And Bill, but before we get on to talking about the devastating events in Europe, particularly the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, or the United States being ready to announce a new Iranian nuclear deal, or tensions in the Israeli government and Israel's response to these crises, I just want to touch on your thoughts about your neighbors in the north, for example, Canada, and Justin Trudeau using emergency powers to break the Chukka Freedom Convoy, and having the power to arrest any members of his parliament, despite the fact that our Queen is still the head of state in Canada. Could you imagine a time when a democracy became an authoritarian regime?
No. We watched it in Australia, and then it took it to a whole new level with our neighbor at the north, Canada. I've spoken in churches throughout Canada. Wonderful, wonderful people. But I tell you, the Christians in Canada have had their hands full, whether it's free speech, freedom of speech, biblical speech, and on for the last 5, maybe longer, 10 years. And it's difficult. And then to see what Trudeau, a member of the World Economic Forum, and his foreign minister, Christopher Freeland, and what they did, and the way they took it down, the way they penalized individuals. And then shortly thereafter, the Canadian Banking Association came out and talked about this wonderful digital currency that they're developing. And it was so seductive, for the lack of a better word. Oh, security and peace and confidence in your funds and ease of use. And we're moving in this direction. And what, from the study that I have, whether it's China, the possible digital coin, the Fed coin that we're going to have in the United States, is what this is going to lead to, Simon. At some point, the government says, I don't like what Simon and Bill's saying, we'll just shut off their money. And that's the concern in China right now. They have social scores already. I saw a recent interview of people coming off a train in China and had a number on each one of these faces through facial recognition, plus 15, minus 10, plus 20. This facial recognition, tying it into a digital currency system, is going to lead to a point at some time when the governments will control what is said in the public space. And that's what's happened in China. And this Trudeau government is in lockstep with the World Economic Forum. These are part of the young leaders that Klaus Schwab has put in place all around the world. We heard the Prime Minister of Prime Minister of New Zealand say, "Build back better." We heard the Prime Minister of Canada say, "Build back better." We heard the Secretary General of the UN talk about build back better. We hear Biden talk about build back better. Well, that's right from Davos. That's from their own website. That's from their own language. So we're watching this very, very closely. And we know what's going on here. And they're doing what they can to implement a lot of control over our population. We'll keep fighting it. But I tell you what, it's happening at an alarming pace. And then again, this is falling in place, as the Bible speaks of.
And Bill, if we talk about Joe Biden, your president, he's only just over a year now that he's been inaugurated as America's 45th president, and yet he seems to have created two of the biggest foreign policy disasters in recent history. Firstly, the horrendous and disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, leaving billions and billions of US military hardware for the Taliban, which has probably ended up in the hands of the Iranians. And also then his handling of the Ukraine crisis, and potentially another one if America accepts a new Iranian nuclear deal. Can you share with us what is going on in the United States, particularly in terms of foreign policy as it relates to Israel and the Middle East?
Well, former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates said Biden has been on the wrong side of about every international decision that's been made by the United States for 50 years or 40 or 50 years. He says he's always on the wrong side of these decisions. He and Barack Obama were the ones in favor of bringing all our troops out of Iraq. Pentagon said we need at least a couple thousand, up to 10,000. If we pull them out, it's going to be problematic, and that birthed ISIS. And we saw how horrific ISIS became. The debacle in Afghanistan was such a debacle. I mean, it's almost like it was on purpose. How could anybody screw something up so bad as Joe Biden and his team? It was a fiasco. And then we have this team of Blinken, who has a very suspect history. He's our Secretary of State, nowhere near, not even close to a Pompeo. And then we have this guy named Sullivan, that's a national security advisor. He's low gravitas, no experience. I mean, you can't even take these guys serious. And unfortunately, our Pentagon, led by General Austin, Secretary of Defense, and then the Joint Chiefs of Staff head, Milley. I mean, when you look at these guys, you go, oh my gosh, this is the US administration, the Secretary of State, the Defense Department. And then we have unfortunately, somewhat of a clown show of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It's unbelievable. And then we have the mainstream media doing everything they can to prop these people up. They will never admit anything that Trump was right about because they don't want to give him or his followers even an ounce of acceptance or approval. And so consequently, we have 85 to 90% of our public, or 85 to 90% of our media telling the public what's going on in their context, and it's not true. So we have a real battle for truth here. But the bottom line is these leaders. I mean, Trump had his issues, but I tell you what, he was unpredictable, but he was strong. And Pompeo was brilliant. And the Defense Department was in some good hands. And unfortunately, we're not there right now. And that's what's empowered Putin. That's very likely what's going to empower the president of China, Xi. And, we're at a very precarious time, Simon. I don't know how it's going to play out, but unfortunately, our leadership is very weak.
Absolutely. Also, going back to the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, considering that was a military operation, it seems absolutely crazy to place this operation in the hands of the US State Department and not allow the Pentagon or the US Defense Department to actually deal with this operation and deal with it as a military operation rather than as a diplomatic state initiative. So we can see massive failings in terms of strategic planning regarding this with devastating consequences for the world. And I suppose the most dangerous thing that it did was shatter the illusion of American strength and America as a world superpower that many rogue nations felt like if they did act out of line, they'd face the wrath and the power of the United States. That's no longer the case, is it anymore?
No, not at all. And Biden did not warn our allies, the UK, Germany, France, other NATO countries. We just did it without any warning. We saw how your country and other countries in Europe had to scramble to get in there to pull your people out. This was a fiasco. There is absolutely no excuse for how boneheaded this effort was. And part of it, they wanted to try to hit this 20th anniversary date of 9/11 to show that they were successful. And that was part of their desire to do everything so quickly. We left billions and billions of dollars worth of arms behind. This air base, Basra, a very important base, or I'm sorry, Bagram, a very important base behind. And I understand the Chinese have moved in. I don't know if they have or not, but I mean, at this point, I haven't confirmed it, but the Chinese are certainly looking at that base to establish a position in that country that has $2 to $3 trillion worth of rare earth minerals. And it was embarrassment. It was an absolute embarrassment what happens. But the media downplayed that and downplayed this lack of competence. And I even understood the Pentagon suggested leaving troops there to help with the departure of the Afghans. And then what we heard from the White House said, oh, there were 100,000 people were moved out, the fastest ever in the history of the world, be able to evacuate 100,000 people. Well, about 80 to 90% of them weren't the ones we were supposed to evacuate. I mean, that's unbelievable. So they're bragging about the speed of it, but who'd you bring out? And there's been a lot of problems with some of the ones they have brought out. So it's just total incompetence, Simon. There's no other way to put it.
I can imagine it. And of course, the one issue that's really concerning everyone right now, and that is the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, which is horrific. And seeing that this is the biggest invasion of a sovereign European country for over 80 years, going back to the Second World War, now producing the biggest refugee crisis since the Second World War, and the possibility that we could be on the brink of a third world war, or even worse, a kind of nuclear conflict with Russia, it is enough to really destabilize our entire world system, is it not?
No doubt about it. And the Russians know the fact they have a nuclear capability and also cyber capability, but especially nuclear, has empowered them and has also affected what NATO and the United States have done. General Petraeus, former CENTCOM general and also head of the CIA, very well known around the world, was on Fox News last Friday. And he said, we have to be careful that this does not lead to World War III. We have to be very careful that we do not get into a nuclear war with Russia. And he's one of our warriors. But just that alone, they're being so careful not to get into a nuclear situation. But here you have Putin saying, look, you've already declared war on us. You've declared war on our economy, on our people. Companies are pulling out. So you already have. And then he said, if you do anything to help the Ukrainians, whether it's a no-fly zone or working out a deal with Poland to bring in MiG fighters for the Ukrainian pilots, and the United States replacing those with F-16s, that's war. And if you declare war, we have the nuclear capability. I'm paraphrasing, but we have nuclear capability, and this is going to be a very serious mistake by the West, by NATO, by the United States.
But I mean, I've been doing programs on the kind of build-up of Russian troops on Ukraine's border, particularly going back to April of last year. Now, if I can see that here's a potential geostrategic problem back in April when Putin deployed 40,000 troops on Ukraine's border, then surely some of our Western leaders and our military analysts would have also come to the same conclusion. So what strategic mistakes do you think the United States made? Was it the fact that we didn't deploy enough NATO troops closer to Russia's border? Is it not that we said that if you invade Ukraine, then we will come to the defense of the Ukraine? Because all we hear from your Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is essentially that we will not get involved in this conflict. Doesn't say if you do this, we will respond with this, but all these guarantees of saying we won't get involved, which makes America look extremely weak, and of course makes NATO look weak. And it looks like that we're at the mercy of the Russians, had it not been for the bravery and the courage of the Ukrainian president Zelensky and the Ukrainian people in pushing back that aggressive military invasion by the Russians?
Yeah, I think that first of all, Trump sent some stingers in and some javelins. Don't know how many, but those are the kind of things. They're very effective against tanks. And Russia has tens of thousands of tanks. I think I saw anywhere from 10. I saw one list had as many as 20,000 tanks. It dwarfs anything that Germany and UK, and I think Germany's at 400. I think the UK is now at 200 tanks. But that's Russia's big strength is tanks. Well, we should have better prepared Ukraine to fight. It's known that they're great fighters. So they needed equipment, the javelins, the stingers, maybe even already very likely should have considered the fact MiGs are what the Ukrainians have been trained to as far as planes. The Russians have been on the border for a very long time, 100 to 125,000 troops, and it got up to 175,000 troops. And all of a sudden, some of the retired generals are saying these are their best fighters. This is their best equipment. This is their best tanks. This is their best planes. This is their best. You better get ready. Well, we kind of fumbled. And I think no one expected Russia to hit as hard as they did, as fast as they did. But they have taken major losses, which I think really surprised them. And we've seen some weakness within the Russian military, but they've taken some significant losses because of the equipment that the Ukrainians have. But I don't think anybody expected something to happen so fast, so quick. And the civilian attack now is really, really turning the world against Putin and Russia more so than ever. And they'll never recover from what the world has through the social networks, through the media. I mean, it is the news here in the U.S. I'm sure in Europe as well, in the UK, it's the
Absolutely.
news. So,
sorry, carry on, Bill.
So I'm just going to say the social networks, as you know, Simon, are incredibly powerful at these messages. So that's really worked against Russia as well and Putin.
What's extraordinary as well, that really the Ukraine is now the kind of the epicenter of the world's media and the world's interest, and rightly so, because we haven't seen anything like this for over 80 years, not really since the Nazis invaded Poland, which triggered the Second World War. And to see these horrific scenes of the Russian forces bombing apartment blocks, of allowing safe passages, of calling a ceasefire and allowing the Ukrainians to go through these safe passages and then bombing them with artillery, targeting schools and hospitals with children that have got with cancer. I mean, some of the things we're seeing is absolutely horrific and absolutely barbaric. But my big question coming back regarding this is that how does this kind of fit into kind of Bible prophecy? Because it almost seems as if, again, this Russian invasion of the Ukraine is kind of speeding up events, in a sense that what we're seeing, the reactions of it, just like COVID, will lead to a stronger European togetherness as they push forward towards a European superstate. European leaders, particularly the likes of Macron, will be calling for the establishment now of a European army, that Europe needs to defend herself. We also see the economic impacts, such as the massive rise in oil and gas prices, the rise of wheat, and the revelation makes it very clear that in the end times, that one day's work is probably worth as much as one bit of barley or bit of wheat. And of course, Ukraine is the biggest exporter of wheat around the world, combined with Aliyah, and also the fact that Israel could supply Europe with natural gas. This all looks like we're heading towards Ezekiel 38 and 39, does it not?
Absolutely. The Israelis were very supportive of the Ukraine. There's up to 200,000 Jews living within the Ukraine. The president, Zelensky, is Jewish. And one of the leaders of Russia said, we don't think Israel should have a right to the Golan Heights. It's not yours. I'm paraphrasing. So right after the great outpouring of support for the Ukraine from Israel, they said, well, the Golan Heights is not yours either. So, and then the other thing too is a pipeline from Israel had a tremendous amount of natural gas in the Mediterranean off the coast. They're talking about a pipeline through Cyprus, through Greece to take care of Europe with natural gas. Biden did not support that right about the time all this was happening, to his surprise. And also people in Israel were not very happy about that. But nonetheless, if that pipeline gets put into place, it takes a while for this to happen. And you start supporting, if Israel and these countries start supporting Western Europe with natural gas, and this is competition to Putin if he's still in existence, then this very likely could draw Russia into making a move for that gas. And he wants to control the gas. There's no doubt about it. He's going to do everything he can to continue to have Europe in a very difficult, precarious position because of energy. Europe's made some bad decisions relying on Russia. It's too easy, too close, but very risky and dangerous.
Do you think I mean, we know that we're seeing the prophecy almost being fulfilled in the times in which we're living in, particularly as we monitor these major events. But also, do you think this has also come about primarily because the West has abandoned its Judeo-Christian heritage? The West has pretty much forgotten what evil is. And now when we see evil on our TV screens in news reports coming out of Ukraine, it's a reminder that there is evil in this world, that we do not fight against flesh and blood, but against principalities and the powers of darkness. And it seems that those principalities and powers of darkness have got behind Putin. And really what we're seeing now is that manifestation of evil in Ukraine, and this vicious and evil attack on an independent sovereign nation.
It's vicious, it's evil, but also final days. It's just, Gog Magog talking about the hook. I mean, if in fact Putin's Gog, the Bible speaks of a hook being put in and drawn towards Israel. If in fact he is Gog and Russia's Magog, some people believe it might be Turkey, but if he is, he's certainly aligning for that role. Well, he doesn't have much wiggle room, and he doesn't have much out. He's basically made the decision to go for it, and he's either going to win or be defeated. And the question now is, how far does he go? I mean, we could wake up tomorrow and he's decided to maybe start moving further south toward Israel. He's already made the play on Georgia and Crimea. That Black Sea is incredibly important to him. The Odessa and other ports, Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea, is incredibly important to him, and will be very precarious having it in Russia's hands. So this thing could turn. It could turn quickly. We don't know God's timing in this or how this will play out, but we are certainly moving in that role of Russia's significant role, a facilitator or the one that's directly involved in this Gog and Magog attack on Israel.
I'm talking about Ukraine and the Ukrainian president, and that's the Jewish president, Zelensky. We were looking around at the world. I think both of us would probably be thinking this and thinking, where are the godly leaders in the West? Where are they? We've lost President Trump. We've lost Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. There doesn't seem of any leaders with morality and courage and bravery. And then God miraculously raises up a Jewish comedian who had his own political satire program, did a very popular program in Ukraine on the corruption, and that he was a school teacher and then became president. And now we find out that he is a wartime leader. Just when Putin thought that Ukrainians had a weak, inexperienced leader in power, we see someone like Zelensky, who is really leading the free world and has mobilized an entire nation to stand with him and to fight against Russian aggression. This almost sounds biblical, doesn't it?
It does, especially with when you look into Zelensky's background a little bit more. He was encouraged by Trudeau of Canada to run for president. He also participated in the World Economic Forum meetings at Davos. So it has some of us watchmen really watching Zelensky very closely, because he has a Davos connection, a World Economic Forum connection, a connection to Trudeau. There's photos of him with Trudeau. And he says Trudeau is the one that really encouraged him to get into politics. But you're absolutely right, Simon. No one that I know in a long time has been able to get the worldwide audience that he has. He just spoke to your parliament. He spoke to our Congress on the weekend. 250 members, Senate and congressmen were there for his Zoom call. I understood he had a standing ovation in the UK for his address to the parliament. He is, it's incredible. He's calling out the West. I know a lot of this is motivated because I think it was the early 90s, like 94 or so, the US and the UK told the Ukraine, you get rid of your nukes, we'll be there to back you up. We'll be there to defend you. Russia was part of that agreement too, but that was very significant. Absolutely. And Zelensky says, where are you? We agreed to this and you agreed to help us. Where are you? So it's a very, very interesting role, but he's captivated the world. I mean, he's on the front page of every major news site in the world right now. And he's calling out the West, do something, do it now. Very interesting.
Absolutely. So we've got to pray for his safety and his protection. Talk about another issue, which sometimes when we see these massive world events that are really at the center of the international news cycle, like Ukraine is, that the whole world's media becomes obsessed with what's happening in Ukraine and following this conflict, that we see major other foreign policy developments that get overlooked. So the one that seems to be coming up in the upcoming days is the fact that the American administration is about to announce a new Iranian nuclear deal, and we know that the Iranian regime is ultimate ambition is to develop nuclear weapons and have that nuclear weapons capability, and to be able to have the nuclear warheads on their rockets and missiles that can hit Europe, the United States, and with their intercontinental ballistic missiles can also now hit the United States. Is this another massive foreign policy disaster on behalf of the Biden administration?
Totally. Trump said, you get rid of your missiles and rockets, we'll start talking. And they didn't, and weren't willing to. And they're going to be able to keep all that in this new Biden-led Iran nuke deal that they're working with Russia. Russia's one of the key negotiators in this. Even Lavrov, the foreign minister, said this week, we'll vote in favor of the Iran nuke deal, but we want you to rid us of these sanctions that you put on us. So hopefully it won't get done. But of all places, New Yorker magazine had an exceptional article about how bad this deal is. The fact that Iran is developing and deploying missiles throughout the Middle East. They have more missiles and rockets now than the United States and Israel combined. They're deployed to the point that it puts Israel at extreme risk. I understand they have as many as 15,000 missiles now on the northern border of Israel, just inside Syria and Lebanon, to complement the 150,000 rockets they already have pointed at Israel. So, and also as far as enrichment restrictions are not being negotiated satisfactorily. And even the Iran leader, one of the negotiators, that a leader in this effort, is saying the United States is going to have to make some tough decisions here. Huh, well, who's in a position of strength and who's in a position of weakness? It's ridiculous. Okay, the United States is going to have to make a decision on some of these very difficult positions. But you can't out-negotiate Iranians. I had a friend with the Israeli embassy in DC tell me years ago, you can't out-negotiate these people. They'll agree to a deal. They won't fulfill it, go back to the negotiating table and agree to a deal with less teeth, and then not agree to that. And then it just goes on and on and on. Iranians don't fulfill their agreements. The Obama P5+1 agreement released billions and billions of dollars to the Iranian war machine. And we're talking about more billions being part of Biden's nuclear deal. He's going to have a tough time getting it through Congress if they actually vote on it. We'll see, but it's not a good deal for Israel. And also, Israel's at a point right now. I was on an Israeli defense briefing the other day, Simon. Israel's going to have to take care of themselves. They can't rely on Russia. They can't rely on China. They can't rely on the United States. They're at a place right now where they're going to have to take care of themselves, and the God and the God of Israel be there for them.
Amen. And we know that he who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And we're so pleased that God is in control and he's sovereign despite the kind of scary and difficult ride that we're all living through as we see kind of world events unfold. But talking back to the Iranian, I mean, one thing is really hard to comprehend. We have in your government in the White House an extreme left-wing progressive government that is essentially pursuing all these policies. And yet at the same time, when we look at the Islamic Republic of Iran, and only last year, they've elected their most hard-line government really since the Islamic Revolution in '79. So how can these extreme kind of progressive liberals share the same platform with these violent Islamic extremists that want nuclear weapons in order to terrorize the world and continue their support for international terrorism?
Absolutely. That alone should stop negotiations, along with some of the things that they said in Vienna. A couple of Biden's top negotiators just quit. It was getting to the point of just being totally ridiculous. And a typical Iranian, they worked for 6 months, getting very close to a deal. And at the last minute, Iran changes two things. Completely throws everything out, the plan, the excitement of getting a plan done, and then they retrade at the last minute. This is Iranian strategy. It's been that way forever. And this progressive element, I mean, we also have parts of that squad, some real radicals. Omar, the Muslim from Minnesota, Talib from Michigan. They're pretty radical. They're also promoting this critical race theory, LGBT plus transgenderism education, and some things in the schools. Actually, it's coming back to haunt the Democratic Party. Even some of James Carville and others, political guru for the Democrats, is saying this progressive arm of the Democrats is killing our party. We're going to get wiped out at the midterm. It's going to happen anyhow, but the question now is how much of a wipeout? So what happened is they've overplayed their hand. They've influenced Biden. They've led us, I mean, even they're part of the global warming agenda. They're the ones that want to move us off of hydrocarbons immediately, which is just crazy. You can't do it like that. And so actually, Simon, it's been a fiasco. It's been dangerous. It's been politically costly to Biden and his political party, and hopefully very positive to the Republicans and conservatives going into the November midterm elections.
Absolutely, and we pray that would be a shock that would send a political shockwave right through the political establishment in the White House to realize that the American people themselves are not progressive, and this liberal progressive agenda is only wanted by a marginal few, not the majority. But talking about the situation Israel faces, I mean, it's extraordinary. We're probably coming up for just under a year since this coalition government has been in power, led by Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, which represents all spectrums of Israeli society, including having a strong Arab contingent that represent the kind of Muslim Brotherhood in Israel. What are the state of Israeli US relations under Biden? Because, you know, as for me, I miss Bibi Netanyahu. I miss his influence. I miss his charisma. I miss his moral courage. And Israel doesn't seem the same without him.
Absolutely. It's not the same without Netanyahu and even Trump. Trump did more for Israel than all American presidents combined. It's remarkable. But unfortunately, they went that route of a peace process. And January 28, 2020, fate changed for Trump and they changed for Netanyahu, as I documented in my eye-to-eye work. So I think that we're at a point right now, the relationship is not good. Israel's best friends in Congress are the Republicans. Overwhelming support. It's never been stronger. The Republican support of Israel in Congress has never been stronger. And the Democratic support of Israel is getting weaker and weaker, influenced by Omar and Levy, the lady, I just mentioned her name, Tlaib, and Omar Tlaib. It had a dramatic impact on this attitude within the political party, the Democratic Party. So I hope at some point the Jewish people will vote that way as well. They continue to 65, 70, 65, the last couple elections have voted in favor of the Democratic Party and the Democratic candidates. So the Omar Tlaib influence has been dramatic.
And that's dangerous for democracy, isn't it? And represents a kind of sea change in US policy that Israel was once a non-partisan issue. And we saw that strong Democratic members of Congress and the Senate supported Israel together with Republicans, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Does this reflect a general change within the Democrat Party to pander to the extreme left, to pander to the pragmatic left, but also to be hijacked by kind of an Islamic agenda within the party?
Yeah, it's I know AIPAC, who that's the big Israeli lobby, has spent 30 plus years and a fortune with bipartisan support in Congress. And I know it's a concern. It's also a concern about a lot of the young people in our college universities are not pro-Israel like previous generations. Part of that is the young people of America are very much into the people that they consider down and out, that have had a rough go. And the poor Palestinian narrative has been very effective at having an influence on even Jewish young people. But they need to know the whole story. The Palestinian people, majority, as you know, Simon, a majority of the Palestinians would prefer to live in a state run by Israel. There's been incredible corruption within the Palestinian leadership over the years. They have not put their people first. But that's a story that a lot of young people don't know. But once they hear it, then it changes their attitude. So the overall support in the liberals and the leftists in America for Israel has diminished. And that's unfortunate. I don't know how you win it back outside of just one person at a time. But obviously the progressive part of the political party has had an enormous influence on the relationship the United States has with Israel.
Absolutely. And the other factor I just want to bring in now, up until a few years ago, it seemed that the disease known as Jew hatred really didn't have much of an impact upon the United States. It seemed to be that the United States and North America were one part of the world where the Jewish people felt safe. They felt kind of an integral part of American society, of American culture, of America's political system. But over the last year or so, we've seen horrendous violent attacks against synagogues. We saw that hostage siege at a synagogue near you, Bill, back in the first week of January. And we're seeing this explosion of Jew hatred, not only in my country, but also in your country, which over a decade ago would have considered absolutely unthinkable. So why do you think that the disease that is Jew hatred has reached the shores of the United States?
Well, I think former ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, said it well a couple years ago. And he was talking about Europe. He says the anti-Semitic root in Europe has never fully died. It's just been underground, and it's resurfacing. And I think that's pretty much the same way here in America. It hasn't completely died in certain elements within our country, and it's kind of resurfaced. I have a friend, Olivier Melnick from Chosen People Ministries. Was born in Paris. He lives in the U.S. He does a lot of work and writing on anti-Semitism, and it's of great concern. It kind of builds on itself. It's reestablishing itself in Europe. It's getting worse here. I think the Black Lives Matter, that whole attitude and way of protesting was not helpful and led to some even more anti-Semitic outrage, anti-Semitic actions. It's obviously a concern of ours, but I think, again, Ron put it well, that root has never died completely, and that's probably what we're both facing.
No, absolutely. And for, say, for example, the British Jewish community, the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn becoming our Prime Minister back in the general election in 2019 was enough to prompt so many Jewish leaders and members of the Jewish community to contemplate making aliyah to Israel or fleeing to the United States or going elsewhere, which would have been unthinkable in Britain to happen. So we know all it means is a change of political environment, and the whole world changes. How do American Jews particularly feel now that they know that that the Democrats are waning in their support for Israel? We see attack on Jewish synagogues. We see attacks on Jewish schools and other community centers in the United States.
They're concerned, for sure, Simon. Jewish people are very in tuned. They're very sensitive to things spiritually. I think it's part of their protection, that they're very aware, very sensitive, very discerning. And I think what's happened is the good news is it's moved them to an even closer relationship with evangelical Christians that are very supportive of them, very supportive of the state of Israel. We're going to be having a Jerusalem prayer breakfast here in Dallas, March 24th and 25th. The outpouring from the Jewish community has been fantastic, as well as the Christian community. We're looking for a very significant event. Senator Ted Cruz will be the keynote speaker. Michelle Bachmann, the co-chairman of the event, will have a great message. Albert Wexler, our friend, is very excited about the outpouring. And I think that's what we're going to see, Simon, going forward, is just a greater, closer relationship between the Jewish people and the evangelical Christians that are so supportive of them in the state of Israel. They know it's important. They know these relationships are important. In the past, they've looked at their political party as part of that protection. They needed to be part of one political party, and they chose a Democratic Party. But I think they're really seeing this more so than ever before. We need that relationship, a good relationship with our Christian brothers and sisters.
Amen to that. And sounds like a great event, and I'd love to attend. I'm a great fan of Michelle Bachmann, and I know that she's a close friend of yours. So I'll have to, hopefully this year, get the opportunity to interview Michelle Bachmann. It'd be an absolute pleasure. But aside from that, we're down to about 6 minutes of the program left of this interview with you, and I really appreciate your time. What should be our response as Christians? Because, I mean, it's almost as if what we're seeing in world events is how Jesus described the end times would be, that one day we'd be living in peace and safety. The next day, sudden destruction comes upon us. And these seems to be echoing the times in which we're living in. So spiritually, how do we prepare ourselves to live in these last days? And we always thought that, yes, we're close to the end times, but as we get closer, we seem to be shocked by the events that we're seeing. We seem to be shocked at the hatred being directed against Christians, the rise of Jew hatred, the hatred towards Israel, the geostrategic politics of wars and rumors of wars, and moves towards a digital economy, which will lead to the mark of the beast. We all thought that this wasn't too far away, but it feels like we're really now living through it.
I think the word you mentioned, sudden, is kind of the word I'm hearing, or one of the words I'm hearing right now from some of my other friends that are watchmen, sudden. The Lord's appearance could be sudden, unexpected. I think that's what excites us. I think right now, God gave us Genesis to Revelation of how everything was going to play out. We don't know the day or the hour of the Lord's return, but we certainly understand the season, and we're in that. So we need to be very sensitive to what the Lord's wanting us to do in terms of our activity, occupied till he comes, and at the same time, really getting the gospel out. I think that's one thing we can do as believers, whether it's family, friend, or whoever God puts in front of us, or whoever's in front of us that the Lord moves on our heart to share the gospel. I've led a lot of people to Christ just this last month. And it's just, when I say a lot, of 4, which is about 1 a week. And it's just the Lord puts them there. They're ready to hear what I have to say. And the Holy Spirit speaks to them, and then they give their life to Christ. So I think we need to be very, very open to that. And also keep praying for those members of your family that you're concerned about, or friends you're concerned about. Because I have even other friends that are not churchgoers, or even some of my Jewish friends are asking me, what's going on right now? Can you explain what's happening? And I go right to the scriptures. This is what's going to happen. These are the countries I'm watching. These are the leaders I'm watching. And we're excited because the Lord's coming soon. And even some of my Jewish and Arab friends, I've told them before, you've heard of Armageddon, right? And they go, oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the final battle for Jerusalem before the Messiah comes, before the Messiah returns. So, it's a prophetic, biblical perspective, but most importantly, follow the Lord's lead to share the gospel, because now's an opportunity that we can't miss.
I think that's great, Bill, and I think you're absolutely spot on. But how can we kind of use the events that we're seeing today, as you mentioned earlier, to tell people about what's coming from a biblical perspective, such as the tribulation period, such as a one world leader who will be the Antichrist, but firstly, he'll come as a man of peace, the 7-year peace treaty signed with Israel. But of course, what both and I believe is the pre-trib rapture that triggers the end times. Well, actually, the final years of the end times before Yeshua HaMashiach returns, not in New York, not in London, but in Jerusalem.
Well, everything's being put in place. I mean, that's one, even to a certain extent, mercy is the pandemic. It is allowing the final day infrastructure to be put in place. And I am praying like you that the pre-trib position will be totally true and will be taken. But the final day infrastructure of currencies, of the way countries operate, the way leaders take over in the US, the way leaders of states take over. So all of a sudden, if you lose 35, 40 million evangelical born again believers in the United States, we'll collapse. Be less of an influence in other countries in Europe, as you know, but it will have a dramatic impact on our country. So I see the infrastructure is all being put in place right now, Simon, for our departure. And then everything will accelerate to that 7-year covenant. And then the final 7 years, and the final 3.5 years being the worst time the world's ever seen, up to the final battle there in Jerusalem. So we're seeing it. And I see the players being put into place, as well as the infrastructure being put in place that will help facilitate that.
And Bill, within 30 seconds, how important is it that we become watchmen on the walls of Jerusalem and pray for the peace of Jerusalem and pray for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people?
Well, it's a great responsibility, Simon. Just like I tell my pastor friends, there's no greater honor or privilege to be a pastor and to do it right. And I think that all of us, you and me and our other friends, we have a distinctive role to keep our friends informed, where they can keep their friends informed, and keep people focusing on what's important is the gospel, at the same time informed, and getting their family ready for the days that we're living. And that's the important part of being a watchman.
Amen. Bill, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today from Texas in the United States. Thank you so much for your input and your prophetic insight. And to our viewers, can I really recommend you getting hold of this book called Eye to Eye, written by Bill himself, that looks at how Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, plays a major role in foreign policy today, because God is sovereign. And despite the evil times which we're living in, despite the political turmoil, despite the wars and rumors of wars, we're going to understand that history is God's story, and we need to be on God's side in this conflict. So I want to thank you for watching this special Zoom edition or home edition of the Middle East Report.